If you're wondering what muskrat tastes like, imagine eating a rat, but with more musk.
Stephen Colbert, a master at satire and unrivaled speech prowess.
I'm writing OC, it's really small because I don't want to waste chalk here.
Bringing smiles and sometimes unhinged laughter to our faces.
Listen, people, the liberals want to tattoo Obama logos onto the skin of Christian babies, okay?
For a person who creates such an atmosphere, mostly out of rather important topics like politics and religion, surely one might think he's had an easy life and enjoyed success effortlessly and without serious struggles.
I'm a father. I have male vitality. My children flew out my penis like a flame of love.
However, he simply has not. How well do we know Stephen Colbert?
I'm a marijuana addict who should not be trusted with my own children.
What heartbreaking life experiences broke and remolded him into who he is now? Join us as we discuss the heartbreaking tragedy of Stephen Colbert. Early life. Stephen Colbert was born in Washington, D.C., the youngest of 11 children in a large Catholic family. He spent his early years in Bethesda, Maryland before growing up in the Charleston, South Carolina suburb of James Island. Stephen's upbringing was steeped in academia, warmth, and religion. His father, James William Colbert Jr., was an immunologist and medical school dean who worked at Yale University, St. Louis University, and eventually the Medical University of South Carolina, where he became the school's first vice president of academic affairs in 1969. Stephen's mother, Lorna Elizabeth Colbert, was a homemaker who deeply influenced her children. In interviews, Stephen had never been shy to speak fondly of his parents, describing them as devout individuals who also placed a high value on intellectualism. They taught their children that it was possible to question the church while remaining committed Catholics, a skill that will exponentially help his intellect and sharpen his wit when he discusses religion in the future. Despite their intellectual leanings, Colbert recalls having a conservative upbringing. His mother, for example, voted for a Democrat, John F. Kennedy, only once in her life. In a separate interview, Lorna described Stephen as rambunctious as a child. Growing up, Colbert noticed that Southerners were often depicted as less intelligent on television, so he taught himself to imitate the speech of American news anchors to avoid that stereotype. Colbert sometimes jokingly claims that his surname is French, though his ancestry is actually 15th, 16th Irish. One of his paternal great-great-grandmothers was of German and English descent. Many of his ancestors immigrated from Ireland to North America during the 19th century before and during the Great Famine. Originally, the family surname was pronounced as Colbert. Stephen's father preferred to pronounce it Colbert, but maintained the original pronunciation out of respect for his own father. He gave his children the option to pronounce the name as they liked. Stephen began using Colbert later in life when he transferred to Northwestern University, seeing it as an opportunity to reinvent himself in a new environment. His brother Edward, an intellectual property attorney, kept the original pronunciation. This was humorously highlighted during a February 12, 2009 appearance on the Colbert Report when Edward asked Stephen, Colbert or Colbert. Edward replied, Colbert.
I'm your host, Stephen Colbert. Folks.
To which Stephen jokingly responded, see you in hell. Stephen's upbringing in a family that has 11 children can be held somewhat responsible for his complex worldview. His home was an intellectual hub where they discussed topics ranging from literature to theology, a consequence of being born to a father who was in love with academics. He must have been proud watching these children go on and on about intellectual topics. Imagine a scenario where you have to argue your point against 10 other siblings who have their own worldview. This is a huge reason why Stephen can never seem to back down from an intellectual tussle. He was born into a brain tug, where everyone ensures to pull the idea their way in a fierce competition to assert their perspective. For a time, Colbert was uncertain whether he would attend college, which is rather strange considering who his father is, but he ultimately applied and was accepted to Hampton-Sydney College in Virginia where a friend had also enrolled. He arrived in 1982 and majored in philosophy while continuing to participate in plays. Although he found the curriculum rigorous, Colbert was more focused than he had been in high school and was able to apply himself to his studies. Despite the lack of a significant theater community at Hampton-Sydney, Colbert's interest in acting intensified. After 2 years, He transferred in 1984 to Northwestern University as a theater major, realizing that he loved performing, even when no one was attending the shows. He graduated from Northwestern School of Communication in 1986, setting the stage for the remarkable career that would follow. He and his family really had a good thing going. But will this joy last forever? The popular saying is that we know nothing for sure, and while that might be true, there is one thing that has remained certain for as long as time immemorial: the ephemerality of life. No matter how long anyone lives, it is always too short. Stephen, who was born into a family of 10 siblings with whom he grew up, suddenly had to deal with the loss of 2 siblings and his father, who lost their lives in a plane crash. This tragic bolt struck out of the blue on September 1974 when Stephen was only 10 years old. His father and 2 of his brothers were aboard the Eastern Airlines Flight 212 from Charleston to Charlotte, a final journey that ended just outside the runway. The plane crash claimed about 72 lives, 3 of which belonged to his own family. Suffering this type of loss at the tender age of 10 opened his eyes to how ephemeral and fickle life really is. Suddenly, the Colbert home that used to bubble with intellectual discussion and laughter had turned silent, a silence so tangible you could cut it with a knife. However, he navigated these times with his mother's patience and care, being a beacon of hope and something to look forward to amidst their shared grief and sorrow. However, how did this crash really happen? September 11th, 1974 began like any other day for any family except for the Colberts, who found themselves at the tip of a tragic turning point. Stephen Colbert's father, Dr. James Colbert, and his 2 brothers, Paul and Peter, were aboard Eastern Airlines Flight 212, a routine flight from Charleston to Charlotte. Little did they know that the journey was going to end in catastrophe. The aircraft is a Douglas DC-9 and was navigating a standard approach towards Douglas Municipal Airport under what appeared to be typical weather conditions. However, as the plane descended, a critical air incident occurred. Suddenly there was fog that clouded the sight of the pilots, and the cockpit crew couldn't really decipher their altitude, a mistake further compounded by a fatal lack of cockpit discipline. Later, during the investigation, they found out that the pilots were not fully in adherence to the formal landing procedures, which required paying strict attention to the aircraft instruments, just in case of poor visibility conditions. At around 7:34-ish a.m. in the morning, just 3 miles outside the runway, the plane descended too quickly, crashing into a hillside filled with cornfields. The impact was infinitely devastating. The aircraft was torn apart, and so was Stephen when he heard the news. The crash was so bad, and according to reports, it was a rather gory sight to behold, a sight first responders will never forget anytime soon. Among the 82 on board, 72 perished, including his family, but 10 survived. While the news created some problems and stirred up the aviation community, they didn't feel the impact as much as the Colbert family did. The community around him tried to help him and his family deal with the pain of their loss. However, the hole it left in their lives was wholesomely deep and profound, almost like a huge meteorite hitting the ground. How did Stephen cope with this loss? Stephen found a coping mechanism. Stephen, who was 10 at the time, was given the chance to step into the manly shoes of comforting their mother and the rest of his family. He did his best to process this new reality of loneliness that has engulfed his life. However, he felt the pain deepest when he got into college. Let me paint you a powerful mental picture of a campus with freshmen flocking from left and right in a multitude, and their fathers bestowing a look of pride on them and lending out a strong arm around to lift their heavy boxes. Stephen explained that he had a big break in the cables of his memory, as he found it hard to recover his past memories with them since he lost them at a rather young age. At this stage, introspection and solitude had become his sanctuary, and he just couldn't fathom a place out of them. While children his age were bothered about other things like video games or getting pajama sets that matched their favorite shoes, he lived in a more blacked-out version of childhood, dining with the gloom and doom and having tears for dessert. Stephen had always had one thing that he developed from his time arguing with his siblings: sharp wit and humor. However, since the loss of his father and 2 of his brothers, he has found a new purpose for his wit and humor. They became his coping mechanism, a way for him to fill the gaping hole inside of him. He kept silent screams in his head quiet by creating an atmosphere so bright that the doom and gloom residing in his loss could not comprehend. Despite the struggles in academics, which he later revealed were because he just didn't like the conventional studying style, he found solace and a safe haven in performance and literature. While these newly found interests were solely based on escapism, they turned into something more. They became a passion that he couldn't escape from. As someone who has experienced loss, he developed a well-informed character that helps me navigate serious discussions with some level of poignancy and levity. His teenage years had seen him develop some character that was way over his years, owing to the unfortunate event. Forged from the fire of grief, he grew into a sharp steel mind that was further enhanced by his newfound love for scientific fiction and other genres that stretched the imagination of man more than the ordinary. He became an avid reader with a very specific type of text. He loved the works of John Ronald Reuel Tolkien, the writer of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and a dedicated player of the Dungeons & Dragons video game. These habits weren't just formed to create pastime. They were actually lifelines that helped him escape from any natural thoughts about his loss. Early career. While attending Northwestern University, Stephen Colbert initially focused on becoming a dramatic actor, primarily participating in experimental plays with little to no interest in comedy. His lack of interest nearly robbed a whole generation of comedic astuteness. What would we have done without his satire? During college, he began performing improvisation, joining the campus improv team No Fun Mud Piranhas, and later performing at the Annoyance Theater in Chicago. This was during a period when Del Close's Improv Olympic emphasized competitive long-form improvisation over traditional improvisational comedy. Stephen later recalled that he had no intention of joining Second City because the Annoyance Theater community viewed Second City as less authentic due to its mix of scripted and improvisational content. They held a somewhat snobbish, mystical attitude toward pure improvisation. However, after graduating in 1986, he found himself in dire need of a job. A friend working at the Second City box office offered him a position answering phones and selling souvenirs. You know what they say about not despising little beginnings and all that? It seems like Stephen knew it too, so he took the job. Fortunately, he discovered that Second City employees could take classes at their training center for free. Despite his initial reservations about the comedy group, he enrolled in improvisation classes and found the experience more enjoyable than he thought. It almost seemed like he had found his calling. Not too long after his training, his talents opened up a spot for him with the Second City's touring company, initially as an understudy for Steve Carell. During this time, he met Amy Sedaris and Paul Dinello, who would become frequent collaborators later in his career. According to their own accounts about the time they all met each other, the trio did not initially get along. Dinello saw Stephen as uptight, pretentious, and cold, while Stephen viewed Dinello as an illiterate thug. Despite this rocky start, they became close friends while touring together, bonding over a shared comedic sensibility. Lucky for the world of comedy, they figured it out and became close friends. When Sedaris and Dinello were offered the chance to create a television series for HBO Downtown Productions, Stephen left Second City and moved to New York to work with them on the sketch comedy show, Exit 57. The series debuted on Comedy Central in 1995 and aired until 1996. Although it only lasted for 12 episodes, the show received positive reviews and was nominated for 5 Cable Ace Awards in 1995, including Best Writing, Performance, and Comedy Series. And that was the beginning of his journey to television stardom. His transition into comedy is a testament to his resolution and fortitude to do whatever needs to be done and do it right. Impact of The Dana Carvey Show and Stranger with a Candy on his career. Following his exit from Exit 57, Stephen worked for 6 months as a cast member and writer on The Dana Carvey Show, alongside former Second City castmate Steve Carell, and also Robert Smigel, Charlie Kaufman, Louis C.K., and Dino Stamatopoulos, among others, although Louis C.K. was the head writer. The show aired on ABC in 1996, a period when some avant-garde comedy was on display. The show pushed satire to a very daring limit, tempting viewers on a knife edge, and featuring some more nail-biting comedy. After one episode, the sponsors fled the scene as they were not prepared for the backlash that might come from the show. However, they continued but canceled the show after the 7th episode, but Stephen surely wasn't done yet. He briefly worked as a freelance writer for Saturday Night Live alongside Robert Smigel. Smigel brought his animated sketch, The Ambiguously Gay Duo from the Dana Carvey Show, to Saturday Night Live with Stephen, providing the voice of Ace, opposite Steve Carell, who played Gary. Needing to make ends meet, Stephen also worked as a script consultant for VH1 and MTV, and even filmed funny correspondence segments for Good Morning America. Although only one of these segments ever aired, it led to a fateful introduction to The Daily Show's producer, Madeline Smithberg, who hired Stephen Colbert on a trial basis in 1997, an opportunity he grabbed with both hands. Like that wasn't enough, he reconnected with his favorite blast from the past, Danilo and Sedaris, with whom Stephen created a new comedy series for Comedy Central, Strangers with Candy. The show was picked up in 1998, overlapping with Colbert's work on The Daily Show. Strangers with Candy embodied after-school specials by following the life of Jerry Blank, a 46-year-old dropout who returns to high school after 32 years of living on the streets. The show was known for its rather offensive humor and politically incorrect moral lessons at the end of each episode. A perfect example of this politically incorrect moral lesson from Strangers with Candy is found in the episode titled Bogey Nights. In this episode, Jerry Blank, the main character, joins the high school debate team and ends up using underhanded tactics to win. Jerry Blank uses several underhanded tactics to win her debate. Instead of relying on well-reasoned arguments, Jerry resorts to bribery, blackmail, and outright lies. She manipulates the debate by threatening her opponents and sabotaging their preparations, ensuring that they can't present their case effectively. Jerry even steals their notes and uses personal attacks against them during the debate rather than focusing on the actual topic. Now, it would have been more morally upright to ensure that the bad guy does not win. However, experimental theater takes a lot of bravery and maybe too much realism and verisimilitude added to its concepts. So instead of a rather cliché concept of the good guy always wins, they opted for another avant-garde approach. At the end of the episode, instead of learning a valuable lesson about honesty and fair play, the show delivers the skewed morale that winning is everything. And if you aren't first, then you are last, typically using the ends to justify the means, not really something you want to expose children to. Strangers with Candy gave Stephen the time to hone his acting skills, something he had been doing since he joined the Second City touring group. However, now he's able to use his humor and sharp wit to get his comedic timing across to the audience professionally. It would seem he had struck gold with the invention of Stranger with Candy. The Daily Show. For a man who was already on the rise, The Daily Show was the perfect platform for his career. The pivotal part of his career that made him who he became today happened in 1997 when he met The Daily Show's producer, Madeline Smithberg. His work on The Daily Show was nothing short of impressive and transformative, marking a significant chapter in his career. When he joined the cast in 1997, The Daily Show was already a huge force on Comedy Central, but Stephen Colbert's arrival would soon add a new layer to an already well-embroidered comedic fabric. Initially one of 4 correspondents, Colbert was referred to as the new guy for his first 2 years, a period when Craig Kilborn was still the host. However, when it comes to television shows, you can always expect a change of host after a couple of years in order to keep things fresh and keep everyone guessing. The show saw its direction shift when Jon Stewart took over as host in 1999. Stewart brought a fresh political edge to the show, driving it toward a more satirical and insightful take on the news. Colbert, meanwhile, began to carve out a unique niche for himself. He wasn't just reporting the news, he became a parody of conservative pundits, embodying a character that was, as Stephen Colbert himself described, a well-intentioned, poorly informed, high-status idiot. This character was like a misguided compass, confidently pointing in the wrong direction, often clashing with well-informed guests and demonstrating a charming yet glaring lack of knowledge. Stephen Colbert's persona wasn't just about laughs. It was also a canvas where you can paint the most clever critique. He used humorous fallacies of logic as his paintbrush, painting a picture of political and social absurdities. Fellow correspondents, including Rob Corddry and Asif Manvi, took inspiration from Stephen Colbert's style, often noting how they mimicked his unique approach to comedy. One of Colbert's standout contributions was the segment Even Steven, where he and Steve Carell, like 2 mock warriors of comedy, would engage in mock debates about really serious things, turning their confrontations into a comedic spectacle. Another favorite was This Week in God, a satirical exploration of religion in the news, complete with the iconic God Machine. His segments, from reporting on gayness in British aristocracy to his mock presidential campaign, were as varied as they were memorable. Stephen Colbert's fame was starting to grow within the Daily Show structure, shedding his new guy moniker like a snake shedding old skin. His role even extended behind the desk, filling in as an anchor when Jon Stewart was away, proving his versatility and depth. He brought a unique spark to the show, lighting up the screen with his wit and satirical edge. By the time he left The Daily Show, Stephen Colbert had not only won 3 Emmy Awards as a writer, but had also left a huge mark on the show, with later episodes even reusing some of his classic segments under the label Classic Colbert. The Colbert Report. Following his exit from The Daily Show in 2005, he decided to follow his niche to a T, leading to the birth of The Colbert Report. His confidence in his ability is something only a person with steely resolve could do. He had the option to hide in his shell and lose himself completely by staying on the periphery. However, he closed his eyes and clenched his fist, raging on like an erupted volcano, and decided to host his own show and fill it with as much satire as possible. One could say this is the point where he threw the kitchen sink at it, and he didn't miss. His career took a whole new shape when he took his own show into his hands. Stephen Colbert took his satirical talents to new heights when he hosted his own show. This show was a spin-off from The Daily Show, and it became an iconic parody of television news broadcasting, specifically targeting the cable news talk show format popularized by legends of television entertainment like Bill O'Reilly, Sean Hannity, and Glenn Beck. The Colbert Report was a very different concept from what the audience was used to. The show was absolutely unique. It was a satire of conservative political talk show hosts. Stephen Colbert's character was a parody of those types of commentators, exaggerating their traits and viewpoints to highlight the absurdities and contradictions in political discourse. The show used humor to critique and mock the style and substance of conservative punditry. Interestingly, The Colbert Report began as a fictional series within The Daily Show, presented as a joke in a series of segments. However, the concept quickly caught on, leading to its development by Stewart's Busboy Productions and eventual green lighting by Comedy Central, who were eager to expand the Daily Show franchise. The show premiered to strong ratings, with an average of 1.2 million viewers per night during its first week, securing its place as one of Comedy Central's top-rated shows within its first month. Colbert's on-screen character shared many aspects of Colbert's real life, though often with a humorous twist. The character was depicted as having a deep knowledge of Catholicism, science fiction, and The Lord of the Rings. He was also from South Carolina, the youngest of 11 siblings and married, mirroring Stephen Colbert's actual background. However, the character's history often diverged from reality, with Colbert's acting and comedy career downplayed or denied, and his alma mater switched from Northwestern to Dartmouth College, which was known for its conservative leanings. During the 1980s, The Colbert Report left a great legacy on television comedy, being that it was an avant-garde television satire, and it surprisingly got accepted as Stephen was successfully blending sharp political satire with a character-driven format. That made it both a critical and commercial success. What was it about Colbert's satirical character that resonated so strongly with audiences? And how did The Colbert Report pave the way for future comedy that dared to blur the lines between fiction and reality? The Late Show. Stephen Colbert's avant-garde style of television satire has reached all corners of the television landscape and entertainment industry, including the Late Show franchise. It would seem his experimental style of satire has now been accepted all over the entertainment world. After being announced as David Letterman's successor on The Late Show, Stephen Colbert took over hosting duties in September 2015, marking a significant shift in the show's tone. While David Letterman's version of The Late Show was known for its variety of humor and celebrity interviews, Colbert brought a sharper political focus to the program, reflecting his years of experience in political satire on The Colbert Report. He has carved a niche for himself and isn't ready to let go of it. It wasn't much of a problem for The Late Show, as the producers didn't force him to switch his niche and follow the status quo. They asked for fresh blood, and that is exactly what they got. He took the show by storm, and he was amazing from the get-go. One of the early highlights of Colbert's tenure was his hosting of the 69th Primetime Emmy Awards in 2017, where his blend of wit and political commentary was on full display. Beyond The Late Show, Colbert has expanded his influence through his production company, Spartina Productions, which has been behind projects like Tuning Out the News and Fairview, as well as his role as an executive producer on Comedy Central's The God's Honest Truth. For Stephen, comedy isn't just comedy. He sees it as a vehicle to propel change and understanding. It is a tool for shedding light on the uncomfortable or overlooked aspects of life, politics, and religious morals. Through his nuanced approach, he encourages fans to engage situations with humor, wit, and critical thinking. How does a man harness the darkest moments of his life as a tool to light up America? Awards and honor. If there is anything certain about the entertainment world, it is the fact that effort and talent are not only seen, but appreciated. In the year 2000, Colbert and the other Daily Show writers received 3 Emmy Awards as writers for The Daily Show, and again in 2005 and 2006, a serious testament to their consistency. Stephen's fame continued to soar as he continued grabbing hearts and turning heads on his new show, The Colbert Report, and his consistency didn't go unnoticed. Hence, in 2005, he was nominated for a Satellite Award for his performance on The Colbert Report, and again in 2006. He was also nominated for 3 Emmys for The Colbert Report in 2006, including Best Performance in a Variety Musical Program and Special, which he lost to Barry Manilow. Manilow and Stephen Colbert later jokingly signed and notarized a revolving biannual custody agreement for the Emmy on The Colbert Report episode aired on October 30, 2006. He lost the same category to Tony Bennett in 2007 and Don Rickles in 2008. However, this didn't stop him from working as hard as he does, or even considering changing his niche. He just won't stop. Did you enjoy the video? Show some love by liking, sharing, and subscribing.